So you may remember a while back that Kanye West said slavery was a choice. And obviously he's insane. But what if I told you that slavery was not a choice, but gentrification is? So I was reading recently that there was this big protest in Washington, D.C. People came out to 14th and U, and I lived in D.C. for years. 14th and U, that was really the heart of Black Washington years ago. And Washington was always referred to as Chocolate City and that sort of thing. Washington, D.C. is no longer a majority Black city, right? And so all these people came out to 14th and U to protest gentrification. They're mad because they feel like they've been pushed out. And so they came and they're playing go-go and going ham to, whatever. But the reality is you can do all that and make that noise, but you still have to go home, right? You got to get out of here at some point tonight because you don't live there anymore and you can't afford to live there. Interestingly enough, I'm reading a book, I've read it before, but the book is called Dream City, and it chronicles what happened in Washington, D.C., and it really kind of follows Marion Barry. And the writer obviously hated Marion Barry, but what caught my eye is the way that we talk about Chicago today. Oh my God, the violence. Oh my God, it's so terrible. Oh my God, it's the worst place ever. When you read that book, that's exactly how people talked about Washington, D.C. in the early 90s, mid 90s. It's a one-to-one. It's the worst place ever. How did it get this? Oh my God. It's a one. It was the exact way. Like, that's exactly how they were talking about D.C. then. So from that period, early 90s, mid 90s, until when Washington became the most gentrified place ever, was like that quick. Like it was that quick. Nobody came with guns. There was no armed insurgency of white people who came to Washington and said, you Negroes have to get out. That did not happen. It never happened. There was no armed rebellion. There was no hostile takeover. No, by and large, what happened was Black people kind of left. Black people chose to sell those properties. Black people chose to listen to the narratives that said, oh, this is horrible. This is the worst place ever. You don't want to be here. You should just leave. Go out to the burbs. You don't want to invest here. Oh, you don't want to buy this property that's super duper cheap that you could have bought easily. Black people listened to those narratives and they cleared a path. And I get it. Gentrification is a very complex issue. Yes, there is public policy. There's tax, but there's a lot of things that go into it. And some of those are horrible, unjust, absolutely. But at the very core of it, here's what I know to be true about white people by and large. As a rule, there are exceptions, but as a rule, white people are not really hungry to move into a neighborhood with a bunch of Black people. You can't show me a mass of white people who really want to do that. They may be happy to invest in a property in a Black neighborhood. They might buy it. They may rent it out. They're not moving it. So you can't have gentrification unless enough Black people buy into the notion that there is no value in their community and they leave. Period. This is a choice. So I'm sitting here in Chicago right now. In the south side of Chicago, people kind of see the tide of gentrification coming. But what's also true in the south side of Chicago, in a lot of neighborhoods, there are an abundance of properties that are on the market for nothing. I was looking at a property last week. It is a multifamily property for sale by the owner. And the owner explicitly says in the listing, I have 2 families in the place right now, good tenants, they've been here for 4 years. Just leave them alone. They're good. That house is selling for $55,000. I looked at it, at least online. The listing, it seemed to be in pretty decent shape. It seemed to be an okay property. $55,000. And you already have 2 solid tenants who've been there for years. You're making money from day one. So I told somebody about this house and I told them what neighborhood the address is. Oh my God, this is such a horrible neighborhood. Once again, we continue to believe those narratives. And in about 10 years, here in Chicago, we will be doing the same thing they did in Washington, on the outside looking in and saying, wow, how did that happen? Oh, they kicked us out. Oh, this protest. The better idea is this. Use people's racism against them. Seriously. Racism actually works in our favor in this case. Since white people don't want to live around a bunch of black people, knowing that, you could very easily say the best way to fight gentrification is simply to sit your black butt right here and just don't go anywhere. And they won't come. It's really that simple. Just sit there. Like, seriously. It's really that simple. If a bunch of black people just choose to live in a neighborhood, to live in a community, not relocate themselves. Furthermore, if other black people consciously choose to invest in those neighborhoods and say, look, these properties are on the market for ridiculously cheap. Just buy them. $55,000, get 4 or 5 people together. Buy it together. Each of you just come up with 5, 10,000, whatever it might be. Not a lot of money. And once you have the first property, understanding that we may not make a lot of money off of this because there's 5 or 6 of us, however many you need to do it. But the point is you can leverage that first property to get the second property, the third property, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth. And now you have a real estate group and you're really doing something. Now you have a bunch of holdings, right? Now you have a bunch of assets in your hand that you can really do something with. Nothing is stopping us from doing that. Nothing is stopping you in getting 5 friends to buy a property for $50,000. There's an abundance of them right now in Chicago. Nothing. But again, in 10 years, you will say, oh, they pushed this out because that same property will be worth $250,000. I happen to live in a building that has a few condo units. The unit downstairs last summer, it's 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, like 1,700 square feet, all wood floors, stainless steel, the whole nine. Beautiful place. It sold for $149,000 last year. $149,000. That's it. In DC, you literally cannot find a parking space for $149,000. Nothing is stopping you from, but you will sit here and let people tell you that you don't want to be here. Oh, there's no value. And so you'll leave. Or you will stretch yourself super thin trying to afford the rent or the mortgage in a white neighborhood so that you can be around white people because for some reason you've convinced yourself that's the only way to live. Okay, and again, everyone is free to do whatever they want. It's your money. I'm not here to tell you what to do. Do you. But don't sit here in 10 years and complain and say, I've been kicked out. And no, you chose to believe the lie that there was no value here. And my question is this, if there's no value here, then why are white folks so pressed to get into these neighborhoods that you claim there's no value there? If there's no value here, why do gentrifiers want them so bad? Why? Clearly there's value. But for some reason, you can't see it in your own neighborhood, but everybody else sees it. And that is a crime. That is a shame. $149,000. And so now they have an asset and they will be here for years to come as these properties grow in value, as these neighborhoods continue to become more and more lovely, whatever. The other unit on the other side is on sale currently for about the same price, roughly in that same area. Once again, nothing's stopping you. I don't care if you own a home or you don't own a home. You can get 4, 5, 6, 7 friends together and begin buying properties in these neighborhoods. Don't sit here and believe the lie that there's no value here. Nobody is coming with a gun and forcing black people to leave. We are choosing to believe the lie that there's no value here. Racism exists, and we get that, but use it for your advantage. If white people don't want to live around a bunch of black people, fine. You black people huddle, congregate, and just chill. Just sit here. And guess what? Your neighborhood will never be gentrified. Buy those properties. Yes, even in those neighborhoods that you say are so terrible you don't want to be there, because guess what? Chicago's the 3rd largest city in the country. You don't think there's value in owning land in the 3rd largest city in the country? Of course there's value in it. I don't care what kind of neighborhood it is. Buy it. And specifically to quote unquote middle class black people, You have to make a choice. Like I said, you can spend your life trying to run away from black people. You can spend your life stretching yourself thin to be around white folks. But I always point out the example of a family member. They built a house from scratch, brand new home in Atlanta for about $300,000. That same home, had it been in Buckhead or Midtown, in white neighborhoods, would have easily been over $2 million. But it's in a black neighborhood. Now, a middle class, nice black neighborhood. But because they made that investment, they're not stretched every month on the mortgage. They had money to invest in another company, and they're going to be quitting they're going to be able to, they have options. They can retire early. They've invested in another business, in fact. Like, all things that would not be possible if they were just consumed with being around white people. So they made a good decision for their pockets. A lot of other people need to consider that. Make a good decision for you and your pockets. You can be stretched thin trying to be around white folks, or you can choose to invest in your own neighborhoods and your own people. Whether you live in those neighborhoods or just choose to invest and buy property in those neighborhoods, I'm just going to say, for middle-class black people, a lot of this is on you. And people will tell me, oh, well, they don't have the amenities in that neighborhood. Okay, cool. But if the median income of that neighborhood comes up, guess what? People will choose to locate stores and things because they're catering to the neighborhood. But beyond that, just stop playing with yourself. Like, I don't care what neighborhood you live in. As a rule, when you want to go to the grocery store, what do? You get in the car and you go to the store. You're going to be doing the same thing here. It's the same thing. Stop pretending as if like you can only move somewhere if you have a grocery store literally downstairs. Just stop. Just stop this foolishness. I guarantee you'll be a lot happier if you have to drive an extra 3 minutes to a grocery store and have money in your pockets to spend once you got there versus being 3 minutes closer and being broke. We have got to stop believing the lie that there is no value in our community. We have got to stop pretending as if gentrification is this inevitable thing that we can't stop. Because what I know about America is so racist that property values automatically increase when the faces are white. They are automatically devalued when the faces are black, and white people do not want to move there. So if they don't value your neighborhood with you in it, why don't you value that neighborhood with you in it? Value that neighborhood, invest in that neighborhood. Nothing is stopping us from buying these properties. Nothing is stopping us from forming real estate groups, linking together. This is cooperative economics. Nothing is stopping you from doing any of these things. Listen, slavery was not a choice. Gentrification is. There's no grand scheme needed to combat it. Literally, just black bodies existing in a neighborhood is enough to keep white folks away. I promise you. Yes, investors will come, they'll buy properties, they'll fix them up. Absolutely. But if no one moves, ain't nobody moving in that house. They can rent it out to some other black people in the meantime. This is a choice. So I saw what happened in DC. It's over. You can protest all you want to. It is over. You cannot afford to live there anymore. So Chicago, Detroit, all these cities, I'm talking to you. Gentrification is a choice. The way they talked about DC then is exactly how they're talking about Chicago, Detroit, and these places now. Don't believe the lie. Stay in your neighborhood. Invest in your neighborhood. Buy properties. If you can't do it as an individual, go together as groups. Go in together. Buy these properties. Nobody's coming with a gun and making you leave. This is choice.